we are going to study the lecture 1. In this lecture, we are going to study about the unit 1, that is the first lecture. In this, we will see about the introduction of database. Now, before going into the greater depth of the DBMS, the first important term that is being needed to define at every moment is the database itself. So when we say about the first term that came into existence is the database. What is database? Database is a collection of related data. That means when we are having related data, collected and related data, then it forms a database. Now, the next important term to know about data is inside in this DBMS is the data itself. That means whenever we are going to study about the database management system, the database management system is itself being formed by the term database management system. So when we study the first term, that is database, the database is itself being formed from the data. What is data? Data is a known fact that can be recorded and have an implicit meaning. So what does happen inside in the data? What we call the data? It is a known fact that can be recorded and have an implicit meaning. Now, the third important thing to study about the DBMS is that why we are studying the DBMS, or what is the basic theme through which the data and the database is related. So we are having a mini world. Mini world means that is some part of the real world about which the data is stored in a database. That means if we say we are having the student, so what does the student represent? Student represent the object for which we are studying the or creating the database. So student will consider the name of the student, student will consider the grades and transcript at a university. So what collectively it is being known, collectively it is being known as the mini world. So this is the example about the basic purpose of the database. Now when we say about the database management system, once we have seen about the data, once we have seen about the database, and we have seen that why the data and database is being needed inside in the mini world, the next important term that came into existence is the database management system. So what does happen inside in the database management system, which is itself being called in short as DBMS. So DBMS means a database, a software package system or a system to facilitate the creation and maintenance of a computerized database. So in short, if we define the DBMS, then DBMS, what is DBMS? DBMS is a general purpose software package or the software or a system to facilitate the creation and maintenance of computerized database. What is the basic purpose of why we are using the DBMS? Since it defines, it constructs, it is used for controlling, it is used for manipulating the database. That means what does it define? It defines the data types, it defines the structure, it defines the constraints, it constructs the storing data on some storage medium. It is being controlled by the DBMS. It is being also needed for the third purpose, that is manipulation. What does it manipulate? That means whenever we are making any query, whenever we are updating the database, whenever we are making the report generation for various applications, we always prefer to use a general purpose software package that is called as the database management system. So what does DBMS actually is? The database system, a database management system is a general purpose software needed for defining, constructing, controlling and manipulating the various applications. Now when we say about the database system, the DBMS software together with the data itself is called as the database. Why we have seen what we have seen. We have seen a data, we are having the data, we are having the database, we are having the database system, and we are having the database management system. So what we have seen the four terms. The first one is the data, the second one is the database, the third one is the database system, and the fourth one is the database management system. So in short, if we say that what is the database management system? Database management system is being formed by the database, and it is totally a software package, but it is itself generally being formed with the help of the data, which is itself being formed by inside in the database. Finally, we are having the database system, and which is a general purpose software needed for defining, constructing, controlling and manipulating the data. Now if we see about a simple diagrammatic representation for the database environment, that how actually it is being represented, or what are the concepts and terminology that is being needed inside in the database system. So we are having the database system that comprises of the user programs with the application programs or the queries, with a rectangular box defining the DBMS software, comprising of the software to process queries, software to access stored data, with the stored database definition and the stored database. So in short, we can say that this complete diagram represents a database environment. Although we are having at the top the database system, we are having at the bottom two cylinders type structure, that is the database, and in between the database system and the database we are having the DBMS software, which is actually responsible to process the queries, or the program which is actually responsible to access the stored data. So at the top is the user, any user or the programmer, who is actually responsible to store the data inside in the database, and the work of the programmer is either to store the data or to take back the data that is already being present inside in the database. So it is being possible only when we are having a software system that helps the user to either store the data inside in the database or to take the data that is already being stored inside in the database. And for this we are having a database system that comprises of the application programs which is being made or run with the help of the queries. So this is the simplified database environment that completely illustrates the concept of the database. Now if we see the example of the database system, that is also being called as a conceptual data model, which we will see in the coming lectures. But at this moment, if we see the example of a database, then we are having the example of a university. That means the university is itself a part of an environment called the mini world. We are having the mini world. Why it is mini world? Since the university will represent each and everything. It will comprises of the entities, like it will comprises of the student, it will comprise of the course, it will comprise of the sections, it will comprises of the department and the instructors or the teachers. While the relationship that exists between these different types of points or these different types of things is the sections are of courses, student takes sections, course have prerequisite courses, instructor have sections, courses are offered by the department, and student have majors in the department. So this is a simple representation that how the database will be made up of. This is the simple representation that defines that what are the things that must be present inside in the database. If we see about the same concept that we have seen in the previous slide, that we are having this as the complete representation or the complete example of the database that stores each student record and their grades. So you can see that we are having 6 types of files. The first one is the student file, having the different types of heading as name, student number, class and the major, with the values of the name as Smith and the Brown, student number as 17 and 8, class as 1 and 2, and major as CS. Similarly, we are having the second type of file that comprises of the course, with the course heading as course name, course number, credit hours and the department, which is having the values for these different types of rows as intro to computer science, data structure, discrete maths and the database, with their respective course numbers like this, credit hours like this, and the running department as CS in maths and the CS. So this is all about the course. Similarly, the third is the section, with the section identifier, course number, semester, year and the instructor. Finally, we are having the grade report and the prerequisite. So we can say that every type of course, every type of representation comprises of a values. That means it is an example giving us a complete overview and idea of the database. It is a database about the student record. And if we see, then the database is of university type. Since we are having the university that comprises of the student, that comprises of the course, that comprises of the section, that comprises of the grade report, and that comprises of the prerequisite. Inside in every type of database, inside in every type of database, we are having this as the data. So this is a simple representation about the description that how the database will look alike. It is a formation of database in the form of the tables. It is a formation of database for the university database comprising of the tables with the table heading as a student, as course, sections, grade report and prerequisite. So these are the 6 different types of table heading with the rows representing the values of the specific type of row header like name, student number, class and the major. So this is a simple demonstration or an example giving us an idea that how the university database will look like. Now if we see and compare about the DBMS with the previous types of file processing systems that we are having, we will see that we are having the file system that stores data over long period of time and stores a large amount of data. Although if we look, we are having the traditional file processing systems which are having the value for storing the data for longer period and the large amount of data can be stored. But the drawback is that no guarantee that data is not lost if not backed up. Since the biggest drawback about the file system is that they don't provide any recovery methods, they don't provide any backup method. Secondly, no support to the query languages. We are having the query through which we will be able to process any request inside in the DBMS. But if we look about the traditional file processing system, they don't have any support for the query languages. Also, no efficient access to data items unless the location is known. Also, the application depends on the data definition and they don't have to change the data definition which will affect the application program. In a short manner, what we can say that we are having the change that is needed for data defining and that will affect the application program. How it is being affecting the program? That it provides the single file for each application and it limits the control to the multiple access. Also the data viewed as physically stored. In short, if we compare, we find that the file processing system is having a lots of drawback in comparison to the DBMS. The file processing system is not at all complete in itself. The file processing system does not provide any idea that how the data will be stored. It only gives us an idea that it is having no specification, no particular application, no particular definition for storing it. It is also having the single view. For every piece of work we need a separate file for storing the application, for creating the application. It is having the limited control to the multiple access. The data cannot be shared to the multiple accesses and the data is always viewed as a physical storage. That means whatever the traditional file processing provides, it simply says that we are having all the work that is being done in the form of a representation in the file system. We need to process the file every time a user is going to create a file, every time that user is only being able to access the information. There is no general purpose application. We need every time to have a program to access the file. So that is all about the concept of the simple file processing approach inside in the DBMS.